I hope it is. I'm not very good at this technical stuff. Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and everybody else. We we are waiting for Dean McQuillan, who sent me a message about 5 minutes ago saying, "I'm here," and I wrote back and said, "No,
What
you're not,"
happened?
and
I'm
I
not
haven't
sure.
heard anything from
I
him
think our
since.
reception is horrible.
Yeah.
But anyway, are you all there? Is everybody happy? Goody, goody, goody. Let's have
It
an
looks like we got
introduction.
a full signal.
What the goddamn hell's happening?
Yeah.
Welcome
Can I
back
use
to
your
me
phone?
with the show you want to see. But for those who are
Oh,
new,
okay.
come inside, come inside. There behind that fox is Stephen in a box with some toys and he mocks. Come inside, come inside.
I
Come
don't know if I had my
inside and
earbuds,
listen
whether
to me.
it's
We
better.
broadcast on Saturdays at 3. Hard times with kids, so we have tea. And I stole this song from the LP. Come to the show. It's 40 as you know. Come to the show. It's rock and roll. Come to the show. The Comedy Rhino and Computer Boy. Producers it, you know. At the CFZ, we're both big and clever.
Now, if you think that's good, just wait till you see the piece of footage
Doesn't
that
do
I
anything.
have
No.
pulled together for the end. But anyway, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. It's lovely to have you all here. We've got everybody apart from Mr. McCrinnan, and I don't know where he's gone, but he will probably turn up if the gods of online video streaming are on our side. He will turn up at some point. Tonight we have two special guests. We have the lovely Ken Gerard, who I first met in San Antonio 22 years ago, something like that, a long, long time ago, when I was trying to make a show for the Sci Fi Channel about these strange Texas blue dogs, which is what I want to talk about later on this evening. And we also have, all the way from
Keep
somewhere
losing.
in Alaska, we have DJ Brewster, and here's David McQuillan. We have Mr. McQuillan is in the house. We have DJ Brewster all the way from Alaska, and he is the
Yeah.
star of the Alaskan Killing Bigfoot. Killer, not Killing Bigfoot. I'm doing really well this evening. But we have our two special guests, plus we have our regular panel of V. McQuillan, Dave Scott, and Ian Squibbs, who are here to debate, discuss, and generally take the piss out of the latest fortune zoological news. And the whole thing is run by me and the lovely Vivian, who at the moment seems to be locked behind one of those randy things saying that she's lost her connection. But welcome to everybody. Welcome to everybody who's watching. Welcome to everybody who's here. And so let's start off with. Well, we can't start off with DJ Brewster because he's disappeared because we can't get the connection. Kenny, what's been happening with you over the last year or so?
Oh gosh. Well, I just moved across country. As you mentioned, I've been in Texas for nearly half a century, but now I'm in New York, upstate New York. Beautiful home, 100 years old here in the Catskill Mountains overlooking the Susquehanna River, and it's just beautiful scenery, and it's just kind of It's cold. You guys are used to that, cold and wet. I'm not so much. Other than that, I have a new book out, The Essential Guide to Mothman and Other Flying Humanoids, and teaching online cryptozoology course over the past year, and that's been going very well.
How does the online cryptozoology course work?
I set up a Zoom meeting, so it's about an hour and a half in length, and then I broadcast it usually on Saturdays. And I have had some international students, but mostly here in North America. And so we cover Cryptozoology 101, of course, is the first class, and that's all the foundational stuff about the history and the founding and what's happened in the past, the zoological aspect. Then we cover, of course, cryptid hominins, aquatic cryptids, winged cryptids, cryptid carnivores like mystery big cats and thylacines. And then my final class is kind of investigative techniques. And I do provide quizzes for students. They're optional if they want, extra assignments and things. But I've had some great students really, really tuned in, and I can tell they're really absorbing the material because of their grades and so forth. So that's been a lot of fun. Oh, I also provide a recorded link to the class if anyone has a scheduling conflict.
Oh, that's good. That's jolly good. So how does somebody sign up for the course?
Well, the best way is to go to my website, kengerhard.com, and there's a link right at the top. Or you can also find me on Patreon on Exploring Cryptozoology, and I have different membership tiers depending on what people are looking to learn.
Well, the thing that we've been talking, that you and I over the years have done most collaboration about, has been the strange blue dogs that some people totally erroneously call chupacabra.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me,
Yeah.
any more news on that in the recent last year or so?
Yeah, well, I know you, as you said, you came to San Antonio in 2000, I believe it was 2005, because you were there 1 year after Devin McAnally shot the animal on his property, and that was in the spring of 2004. So I believe we met in 2005 near San Antonio, and then you returned to Texas a few years later and did another investigation where I believe you went to the Hayek Ranch and perhaps Phyllis Canyon's property. And so, yeah, we've both been kind of looking into these anomalous animals for, a couple of decades now.
I've just had a flashing thing come up saying device not connected from Spooky Viv and DJ Brewster. They'll join us when they can. So, what's been happening recently on this subject?
I just want to say something quickly.
I'm hearing some other voices in there.
Yes,
Can you hear me?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, I don't really get as many reports or photographs as I used to. Back in the day, I would get a lot of people sending me videos and photos, and the things are actually fairly common. I finally eventually saw one myself in 2018 or 19 at night when I was driving by Corsicana, Texas. And of course, at first I saw just the movement of an animal on the side of the road in the ditch. It was very dark. I could see the eye shine. And then as I got closer, I thought, okay, that's a coyote. And then as I got really close, I said, that coyote is hairless. It's kind of a ghostly pale color. And that's when I realized it was one of these blue dog animals. So, I mean, I don't know how terribly common they are, if their populations have increased, but they're certainly, not as rare and elusive as other cryptids that we talk about, if you will. So I've examined the remains of about a half dozen of the animals. You looked at remains too. I've had DNA tests done on one specimen that turned out to be a feral dog. And I've got some bones and tissue samples laying around here and there, but I haven't honestly invested a lot of time in that particular mystery in recent years. I guess the fervor has just sort of died down, perhaps due to people like you kind of, forgive me for kind of stripping down the chupacabra sensationalism into a more, substantial type of mystery. And so people, as you know, really enjoy the sensational aspects of the chupacabra and what that represents. So once it became a Texas blue dog, it was still pretty interesting to those of us who are hardcore cryptozoology nerds, but maybe not so much to the general public. I don't know.
Well, the reason that people got these things mixed up with chupacabra is actually quite an interesting one, because, as you said, Devin McAnally shot one at the end of 2004.
Spring of 2004. Mhm.
Spring of 2004. I went there in December 2004.
Okay. Mhm.
And he took some Polaroid photographs of it, and he went to his local store, and the lady who owns the store, who I've met, is a lady of Hispanic heritage, and she said, "Oh, it looks like you've got your very own chupacabra," meaning it looks like you've got your very own mystery animal. Whereas he and somebody else who was with him totally misunderstood and thought that she was saying that this is the same as our chupacabra from Puerto Rico, which it is not. There's absolutely no evidence that these things suck blood. They certainly don't have spines up their backs. They're not semi-bipedal, and they're not living in the high grassland plateaus of Canovenas and Puerto Rico. They are canids of some sort. They're dogs of some sort. Some, like you said, DNA is tested that they are dogs. Others have the DNA from Phyllis Canyon's ones appear to be a simple hybrid between Mexican wolves and coyotes. By the way, if I'm going to be accurate here, in Texas, are they coyotes or coyotes? I've heard them described as both.
I imagine you could use either term. You know, it's just different dialects, much like you folks in the UK have kind of different dialects from region to region. It's, you know, coyote. Yeah, I think those are the two common terms. But yeah, they're very common. In fact, urban coyotes have become a big deal in Texas. They become so prevalent and the population's expanding that I've seen coyotes running literally through suburban San Antonio through a gas station parking lot and stuff. So they're the coyote population in Texas is doing quite well.
And they are cute. They are cute looking animals. Let's not be mistaken. I'm going to put the girly stance on this.
By the way, V, did you try and say something just now and got cut off?
We were saying that coyotes are cute.
Yes, I heard that was you, Vivian. God,
Yeah.
it's all getting very peculiar this evening, isn't it? Mr.
Oh,
McCrinnan.
me. Oh, Mr. McCrinnan, my big brother.
His face is cut off.
I can't hear.
There it is.
Were you trying to say something, V?
Hmm.
No.
I think he's
Well,
gone.
really, we're not doing very well with the technology tonight, are we?
We'll get there.
Well, we'll get there in the end, because it's still better than it was last week when V and I did a whole show with nobody watching because I'd managed to get all the settings of what we were broadcasting completely wrong.
So John, you had a carcass of this blue dog though then when you were visiting the location.
Well, I have colleagues in Killeen in Texas who have got bits of a blue dog in their freezer, and Ken's got.
I've got some bones and stuff.
And so the
Teeth.
thing I think, the two things that are most interesting from my point of view are, one, with the ones that are a hybrid between Mexican wolves and coyotes, or coyotes, whatever they are, where the bloody hell did the Mexican wolf DNA come from? Because all the known Mexican wolves were caught back in the mid-1970s, taken into captivity for captive breeding program. And although some have been released into the wild, it's well over 1,000 miles between where these things have been found in Texas and where the reintroduction program's going. So the ones in Texas come from a place where there never were any Mexican wolves. So where the bloody hell's that DNA come from?
Hmm.
We had wolves in Denton.
Sorry?
We had wolf reports in Denton. I never saw one in Denton myself, but we did have reports of wolves going through.
Well,
But I think they're the same as everything else. I know Kennel, I don't know if you remember back in the TBRC days, but I think it was John Binganell and Alton Higgins were doing that transition of Bigfoot through San Antonio on migration.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought they were going into New Mexico. So there could be some kind of a waterway or just a natural nature path that comes through from New Mexico and Mexico.
And
So-
Dave, what is TBRC for the viewers?
Texas Bigfoot Research Center. It used to be
right.
run by Craig Woolheater. I think it's defunct now. I think Craig shut her down. Did he not, Ken?
He kind of has a reiteration of it around. He's not as active in the investigation. He mostly does conferences and
Yeah.
organizes gatherings and things, but I don't know how much field research he does, but he still has an entity, I believe, that's known as the Texas Bigfoot Research Center or Conservancy or something.
Because that's how you and I met, is it not?
I believe so. I attended most of those conferences through the
Yeah.
years. They were annual. So,
Yeah.
John, if I could interject one thing about the wolf DNA that you brought up, that's a good point. I don't know if you heard about this finding, but in recent years, they have detected red wolf DNA, not gray wolf, but red wolf, Canis rufus DNA in the coyote population around the Texas Gulf Coast in places like Galveston and extending up to Orange, Texas, and Louisiana, where our friend Chester Moore is from. And Chester actually thought he got a photo of a red wolf on his trail camera years ago. But I'm wondering, because now we're talking not very far from Phyllis Canyon's property when you're talking about places like Galveston and Matagorda County and down there. So if we know that there's red wolf DNA in that coyote population there, we know the red wolves probably were driven out of that area or whatever you want to say, extinct years ago. But is it possible, because those original DNA tests that you and I knew about with Phyllis Canyons, those happened in like 2007, somewhere 2007, 2008. Is it possible that DNA, that wolf DNA that was detected in her specimens was actually red wolf DNA from that population on the coast and not gray wolf? And perhaps and during that time period, I have to profess I'm not real knowledgeable about DNA. I know a little bit, but they simply called it a Mexican wolf DNA because Mexico is the closest place that they knew that wolves lived. They didn't know at that time that there was wolf DNA in the coyote population of Southeast Texas. So I just want to throw that out there as a possible idea.
That's
the question.
that's a horrifically likely idea. And
Can I ask a question?
yes,
Ken,
Yeah,
when you talk about this DNA testing, could it have been that in the labs that when they tested for the DNA, they've gone back further than you realise, where these animals could have interbred way back when, and this blue or red DNA, blue wolf or red wolf DNA could have been detected because they've gone back quite far.
I've seen the DNA printouts from the UCLA labs, and they are adamant that this was a simple hybrid. That means one parent was a Mexican wolf, the other parent was a coyote, rather than an introgressive hybrid where it all got lost back in the mist of time. But I think that what Ken's just said about the idea of it being basically they couldn't be asked and did a half-assed job is frighteningly like we were discussing last month, about the famous Jarek report of the Dinsdale movie of the Loch Ness Monster, which I've always thought that Jarek, which is the Joint Air Reconnaissance Investigation Centre, which it's part of the British Royal Air Force. I've always thought that they took one look at it. They were just about to go down the pub and they couldn't be bothered to do it properly. So they said, oh, yeah, it's an animal. Not realizing that 50 years later, people would still be analysing what they said.
They said it was an animate, wasn't it? Animate was the word they used, which I don't like. But carry on, John.
But if they'd said, if the similar thing had happened with the people who had analysed the Phyllis Canyon's roadkill animal DNA, and they just couldn't be asked to do it properly, so they said, oh, well, it's near to Mexico. Let's say it's a Mexican wolf. But unfortunately for that theory, I think she had it analysed by 8 different universities or 8 different labs, and they all came up with the same answer. So either you've got a load of different labs who are all doing a half-assed job of it, or somewhere you've got Mexican wolf DNA floating around in a place where there used to be wolves living in that part of Texas, but not Mexican wolves. There were 2 other subspecies of wolf, both of which are extinct now.
Well, John?
Yep.
How long has the DNA database been around? Is it possible that the red wolf just wasn't in it at that time? So the closest thing they had was the Mexican gray wolf?
No, I don't think so, because I actually know the person who is the species officer for the red wolf for the International Union for Conservation of Nature.
Yeah.
I don't know him very well, but we're on swapping emails every couple of years sort of terms. And I would be very surprised if he hadn't made sure that there was a proper DNA entry in the DNA database for that. Because the thing is about red wolves is, depending on who you believe, but the red wolf may be a totally separate species to the grey wolf. Mexican wolf is a subspecies of the grey wolf. And all the grey wolves evolved into being grey wolves in what's now Iran and Afghanistan. I think about 1.5 million years ago, but I won't like to be
Well, I wasn't around back then, so.
No, I'm the oldest.
Are you sure?
V, do you realise that you've got your microphone muted?
I did have it muted. I just realised.
Oh, because I've been trying to unmute it.
I've spoken about 5 times, but nobody could hear me talk.
Do you have wolves in Alaska?
Yeah.
Do you have blue wolves in Alaska?
No, I don't think we have blue wolves.
What kind of wolves do you?
Blue wolves?
Grey.
Grey wolves.
You do have some strange mystery dogs, though, don't you? Is it in Alaska you have stories of a wolf called the Wahila?
What was that?
There's stories of a mystery wolf in Alaska called the Wahila, isn't there?
That's the saber wolf.
Well, the one that that company claims to have brought back from extinction by genetic modification. which
Oh,
they
that
have.
was dire wolves, wasn't it?
Now, hang on, what's the saber wolf then? Tell me.
The saber wolf's in that. It's like a saber-toothed cat. It has great big canines. The front cover of my new book, that's what the cover is. It's the saber wolf. It's not a Wahila. Yeah, well, it's a Wahila, but the drawing is based off of a saber wolf. They were really prominent. It's what a lot of people say might be in the Headless Valley of the Nahanni. That's what I wanted to take Ken up and go explore the Nahanni Valley, but $250,000 was out of my budget.
Ron, there is a legendary wolf from Alaska known as the Amarok, which is similar to the Wahila. It's described as a solitary giant wolf, much shaggier and usually like a whitish color. Amarok, I forget which tribe, but it basically translates to demon wolf. So there is a kind of a tie in there between what Dave's talking about in the Western Canada, the Nahanni Valley, and the Amarok in Alaska. Both sound like similar legendary wolf-like creatures.
Have you come across any of these, DJ?
No, I have not.
Because most of what you deal with is Bigfoot, isn't it?
For the most part, yeah. But where we live in Alaska, there's a bunch of different bears and stuff like that also that you gotta definitely watch out for. And then the wolves and the coyotes are also very populated up there too.
It's a place I've always wanted to go. It totally fascinates me. You've got an amazing biodiversity of animals we know about, let alone the cryptids.
There's a lot of land that has been unseen by the human eye up there, so
that is such an exciting thing to say, because we think these days that we know everything and we've explored every inch of the surface of the globe. What that actually means, of course, is that a satellite from however many miles above the Earth's surface has taken a photograph of it, but nobody's ever been there. And I don't know about the rest of you guys, so I find that a totally fascinating concept. So what
I was just telling a seagull to be quiet.
Well, I'm sure the seagull wouldn't dare to argue with you, Vivian. I don't think anybody dares to argue with Vivian.
Yeah, this one wanted to have a fight with me earlier.
Why, DJ, why did you want to have a fight with her earlier?
I think he's making some stuff up.
He didn't really. He was just talking about fighting when he was younger. Nobody would fight him. I said, I'll fight you.
She would win.
Where is it you are again, Viv? Whereabouts are you?
We're in Norfolk.
All right, okay, fair enough.
So we're in a place called Hunstanton. We've just come here from Castle Rising. And it's funny you talk about wolves, because with Castle Rising, it was Queen Isabella who was known as the she-wolf of France. It's her castle.
And we've just want to say good evening to Nettie, and good evening, Robert, and good evening, Vivian. oh, bloody hell, I better go and look and see how many people's watching. And oh, dear me, I've missed all of their comments and all their greetings. So please forgive me for being totally bloody useless as per normal.
Dave, you've experienced these Texas blue dogs, haven't you? You have had some encounters. Please tell us.
Yeah, I had one. I was on patrol in Louisville, Texas.
So what do you do? You're a policeman or a security? What's your?
I was security at the time, and I was heading up.
For security for what? What sort of?
We were actually under contract for the Louisville Police Department. It was to assist in coverage. And I was coming up, and I stopped at a stop sign, which I did occasionally. Usually at 3 o'clock in the morning, I just cuddled
This is
up.
on your patrol, yeah? This is the area you're patrolling. Okay,
Yeah.
Go on. Yep.
And I thought it was a big coyote or coy wolf coming across the road in front of me. And stupidly, I did not. If I would have hit my lights, my cameras would have come on. I could have gotten video. But the whole side of his face was rotted right out. You could see his teeth and his jaws. And all I could do was sit there and look at it and watch it walk in front of my patrol car and go, you are one ugly mother.
Son of a.
Yeah. So, but that was actually really interesting to see because I think Nick was studying them at the time, Nick Redfern.
Yeah.
And so I was reading about his studies and that about it. And I went, oh, I've seen one now. And, oh, what happened there?
We can see one on the screen there. Was that the sort of thing? Was that the sort of thing that you saw there?
Yeah, it was sort of like that because it definitely a coyote with mange or a coy wolf with mange. Because we had coy wolves at work, and they're just a bigger because they are crossbred with a wolf, so they're a little bit stockier and built a little, and they're a little bit more brazen. Coyotes will run pretty quick, but coy wolves they'll hang in there a little longer, so they're a little bit scarier. Ken, you grew up in Texas. Maybe you could address that. But do you find coy wolves a lot more aggressive than coyotes themselves?
Well, I honestly never really encountered one of those. I grew up in the southeast Texas and then later moved to San Antonio, and we had a lot of coyotes. I mean, they're very, very common, but I never really encountered anything like a coy wolf out there. So
But what you saw, Ken, was it like that? What we just saw in the picture?
Yeah, it's identical.
Yeah.
It was, I've seen
the
enough
same
photos.
Yeah.
I've seen enough photos and videos. Ever since John and I began investigating these animals back in 2007 or 2005, 2007. Of course, I'm sure he got gobsmacked with lots of videos and photos too, but I got a ton of them from around Texas and other states, but mostly Texas. And they're all, very similar. Yeah. And then I finally acquired the specimen to one that was roadkilled in 2012. Someone had the wherewithal to contact me soon after, and I went out and collected that. And that's the one that I did the DNA test on. And the one I had, they looked very much, like that photo as well. It did have very unusual overbite, which is something you see in some of the photos, is like the upper mandible really extended far beyond the lower. The canine teeth were very exaggerated, and it also seemed to have the forelimbs seemed a little bit shorter than the rear limbs. I mean, not like dramatically so, but but they all look fairly identical. They're virtually hairless, except sometimes they have like a little frill or a mohawk, just a teeny little wisp of hair on the back of the neck. Otherwise, they're virtually hairless. They do sometimes have growths on their bodies, like Phyllis's specimens has the nodules on the backside, those kind of lumps, and some other physical abnormalities too. So that brings up an interesting question for discussion, which is, are they merely quote unquote mangy coyotes and dogs, or is there a genetic component to it as well? Some type of congenital defects, mutations, or things like that going on? Because they seem to me at least, a little bit of a step beyond merely just a diseased wild canid. It seems like there might be something else going on.
I've got a question.
Mm-hmm.
So you get these bald or hairless cats that are now quite the rage and everyone wants them. Why can't you get these hairless dogs, these blue dogs? Why does everything have to sort of, that could be mange? It could be that it's just a bald dog.
Yeah, there are breeds. Yeah, the people have suggested the Cholo dog from Mexico, which is basically a hairless breed of dog. And there's also a lady up near Austin, Texas, who breeds what are known as Peruvian Inca orchids, which are also hairless dogs. And she invited me out to her property one time to see a bunch of these hairless dogs, because that has been suggested as one theory, is that there could be a hairless, there could be genetics from these hairless dog breeds that are kind of intermingling with the wild coyote populations and so forth.
Well, that would explain a lot of the more healthy looking ones too, eh? You'll see those what they'll call a Texas blue dog, and some of the pictures I said, John, they look pretty healthy. They don't look like they've scratched all their fur off and that. So that would explain that, kid. That's a good point.
I've been to Devon McAnally's ranch twice now, and on each occasion I photographed a stray dog that was wandering around locally that had got sarcoptic mange, and the pattern of the hair loss of a dog we knew had mange is completely different to the pattern of the hair loss on the blue dog. By the way, the blue dog name is something I came up with. It was just purely to try and stop people calling them chupacabra when they're not. The chupacabra is a semi-bipedal creature from the plateau, Canovenas grassland plateau in Puerto Rico, which is allegedly a vampire. But these things are nothing to do with that at all. But one of the interesting things is that, like I said, whereas Mexican wolves are just a subspecies of the grey wolf, the grey wolf is a species which its ancestors, the ancestral wolf, actually evolved in southern Texas, and sometime 3.5 million years ago crossed from North America to Asia across the Berengaria land bridge, which was there then, moved across Asia and finally became a modern wolf in what's now Iran or Afghanistan, and then became one of the most successful species on the planet, and not just colonized all of Eurasia, but bits of North Africa. We now know one bit of sub-Saharan Africa at least, and went back across the land bridge and recolonized North America. Whereas the red wolf, together with the coyote and the dire wolf, which is, despite what that company says, completely extinct, are bona fide North American species which evolved in North America. And so the DNA of a red wolf and the DNA of a Mexican grey wolf are going to be massively different.
Okay, it's interesting. I didn't know that.
So if they are massively different, is one more likely to get class 2 malocclusion, where you're
we can walk a little bit that way, have a look at the sea and then come back.
Hang on, V, I can't hear you, mate. Viv, can you put it if you're
we're gonna shoot off.
okay, love.
But
Bye-bye.
thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you
Bye,
all.
CJ.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, I was saying, do you know if any of these species are more susceptible genetically to class 2 malocclusions, where the lower jaw tends to be shorter than the upper jaw, so that the teeth don't actually mesh properly, as Ken described earlier? That I was wondering if any of these other species actually have that as a trait.
I don't know. It's a bloody good question. Anybody else know?
But it is a good question.
Mm.
Great one.
I think, Ken, you're best qualified to answer this one. Are you not?
I do not know that, but this is an interesting line of discussion. And I will say that I interviewed years ago, I interviewed John Gramieri, who was the curator of mammals at the San Antonio Zoo, who actually examined the remains from Devin McAnally's specimen. And he told me that, and this had been documented in some of his early interviews, that the articulation of the jaw on this particular, he knew it was a canid. I mean, there was no doubt about that. But he thought there was something irregular about the articulation of the jaw. So this is a recurring theme with these blue dogs, that they have either an overbite or some type of, like Bay said, just like I forget the terminology, but genetically, I don't know if there's one particular version would be, or one particular species would be more inclined to deal with that. Now, could we be dealing with, would this be like a congenital inbreeding kind of side effect, like the, like the Habsburgs and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, maybe if one parent was a wolf and one parent was a coyote, the genes just got mixed, so that it got a top jaw that was more closer to one parent and a lower jaw that was closer to the other parent, maybe.
With crossbreeding like that, if it does genetically alter the species, would that not constitute a new subspecies?
Not yet. But
not yet.
What I believe is whatever the exact truth behind these things are, they do not behave in the way that you expect an animal that is gravely ill from sarcoptic mange to behave. And so either it's not sarcoptic mange, or these things are somehow semi-immune to the effects of it. And I believe this is the beginning of speciation. And we're never going to know, because I think it's going to take another 1,000 years. And even Dave Scott's not going to live 1,000 years. But
speak for yourself, old man.
In 1,000 years' time, there will be a new species in that part of Texas, and this is the beginning of the speciation. This is the beginning of a new species splitting off.
Well, Ken, maybe you can answer this, or John. It'll be one of you two. How long have they been sighted? Is this a relatively, like, last 50 years, last 100 years, or is there tales of it going back generations?
John, I'm only aware of Devin McAnally's specimen bursting onto the scene in 2004, and that caught a lot of headlines around the world because of the Chupacabra moniker. But that's the first one. I haven't heard of anyone claiming to have seen one before that.
No, neither have I.
There's no ancient indigenous people tales of them, or
no ethnographic legend or anything like that I'm aware of fitting that animal.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything either. I thought maybe you guys might have, because you seem to have done a lot more study on it.
You've had a second sighting, though, have you not, Dave, you said?
Yep.
Tell us about that,
the
please.
second sighting? Mm-hmm. It was on the same road, up another...
On patrol, what time
On
of night?
patrol, yeah. I was up another 2 blocks. I
time
could
of
show you. I meant to do a map for John.
Yeah.
To show where the 2 were, and you get up near. There's a cadet training school there in Louisville, and I saw one go across the road in front of me. Now it was still a full block away, but it looked like it was on 2 hind legs. Now I talked to Nick Redfern about that, and he thought I'd seen a dog man. I'm not a big fan of the dog man. I think it's mutating something else, but it wasn't big enough. Ian and I were talking about it before the show.
Well, it's interesting though. It's on 2 legs. You know, that's
He may have just been in a hurry, saw my headlights coming, and jumped up, startled, and just kept going. I've seen that before out in nature. You'll see that dogs will do that every once in a while. They get scared and they'll run for a bit on, something. If it's going fast enough, it's going to go across the road, and it's this really windy road that I was on. So,
and there was a different creature to what you saw the first time.
I would say it was, because this one was, it was more skittish because it did go faster. Where the first one, he walked in front of the car. He did not give a flying monkey, He just kind of, I'm walking here,
This one seemed more intelligent, more aware.
Yeah. Which it throws you off, because you're looking at this thing, you're seeing its jaw, you can see the bone. Yeah. You're thinking, hey, you're pretty sick, but he didn't care, so he was, and he did, when he went across in front of the car, he walked like he wasn't dragging or anything. He was confident in his gait.
Yeah. What do you make of that, Ken, then? What do you make of that sighting? Something to go on?
I mean, how long did you see this thing, David? Was it just like a fleeting glimpse, or was it?
He came from one side of the road. I was at the stop sign. He came from one side of the road out of the dark, walked right in front of me, and I watched him go across the road and down the street. It was just kind of like I was just sitting there, kind of in wonder. Did I not share this with you before?
If you had, I've forgotten. I'm sorry.
It may have been Nick, because Nick and I lived pretty close when I was in Texas. So
why would Nick suggest it was a dog man?
Oh no, that was the second one. He thought for sure the first one was a blue dog. So
blue dogs, yeah. Well, as I said, they're become fairly common now. Where is Louisville again exactly, David? I'm trying to place that.
You were in South Texas, right?
Right. I was in kind of the Houston area for 20 years, and then San Antonio for the last 20.
You know where the north split is on 35?
Yes.
Where you go east and west? If you come down 35 east, you go through
Hillsboro. Yeah.
Yeah, and you go down. And Louisville is right beside the lake. You'll go across the big bridge to go across the lake. Well, it's a new bridge now, but it used to be a smaller bridge. But you'll go across a couple of little bays. That is Louisville there on Lake Louisville.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would say, the blue dogs, obviously, and we talked about coyotes are very prevalent throughout Texas. There's probably some degree of variation with those just based on different breeding populations and habit. Texas, most people think of Texas, of course, as like a John Wayne movie. Like it's this big spread wide, ranch with mesas but Texas, obviously, eastern Texas, you have the piney thickets and kind of swampy areas, and then you have kind of a lot of prairies and stuff and savannas in central Texas, and then it kind of trails off into desert. So you have a lot of different ecosystems, which allows for perhaps very subtle adaptations from the widespread species. So you might have a coyote from Louisville might look different from a coyote from Orange, Texas, or whatever. But as I said, I'm convinced the blue dogs are more prevalent than people realize. I don't know if we talked about this, but I actually found a correlation between coal burning power plants in Texas and the sightings of the blue dogs. So around Cuero, Texas, Elmendorf, up near Harvey Hayek's property in Fayetteville. There's clusters of these blue dog sightings in and around coal burning power plants, which fortunately most of those are getting shut down in recent years because they did determine, of course, the obvious thing is that these coal burning power plants were pumping, just ridiculous amounts of sulfur dioxide, lead, mercury, and, other heavy metals into the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. So, I have speculated on other shows that perhaps there is some type of component of, this environmental impact of these contaminants being, because would we agree that coyotes might be considered somewhat of an indicator species if they're so prevalent? Yeah. They're a keystone species. They're eating everything. They're drinking the water. They're moving all over the place. So I think that's an interesting point of discussion as well. So maybe that's what you saw is just kind of a different variation of that, Dave.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I like that. That's good food for thought.
We've just had a comment in from Barbara Mora in Southern California, who says, I recently saw a short clip of a canine that had both top and lower teeth positioned past the muzzle. It may be AI, but if not, what purpose would it serve to have that? Well, I think I know the picture you mean. It's one that was recently allegedly being investigated by authorities in Puerto Rico, who, because somebody has claimed that is going to be genetically the Puerto Rican chupacabra, it isn't. It's a deformed dog. But it's a very, very peculiar looking creature. Have you seen that picture, Ken?
No, I haven't seen it myself.
I have not seen that, no.
No, it's a very strange looking creature. Its teeth almost stick out at 45 degrees. It's a very, very peculiar looking animal.
Is it possible that it's got what do they call that when your lips get pulled back? It's usually a lead poisoning or something does it. The girls that used to paint the radium sickness, where it would pull back and their teeth would come out, stick out the front.
Scurvy.
Is it with radium? Do you remember the radium girls?
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
I wonder if it's something like that. And Ken makes that good point of the coal burning plants. I'm sure you could find some chemical that would have the same effect no matter where you go in the world, because everybody pumps more garbage into the atmosphere than we really need to be.
And in Puerto Rico, as the risk of sounding like I'm shamelessly plugging my book, Island of Paradise, but in Puerto Rico, there, up until surprisingly recently, the American authorities were using parts of the rainforest in the middle of the island for testing chemical weapons and defoliants. And it was where Agent Orange and its ilk were tested before the Vietnam War. And there are areas in the middle of the island which are still being used today for. And I know this because it's the only place I've ever had a gun pulled on me, except in a bar in Las Vegas airport. That's not Las Vegas, Los Angeles airport, but that's a totally different thing. I was in Puerto Rico, my first visit there with Graham, and we were making a film for UK Channel 4. And the policeman that was showing us around said that there was a government laboratory where the bodies of various creatures that had been attacked by a chupacabra had been taken. And he said he'd take us there. So we went there and we banged on the door of this closed, very official looking building. And out came 2 security guards with guns, and the first time in my life I've ever had guns pulled on me while I'm actually trying to find out about what attacked 2 small goats and a chicken.
So you
So
didn't see the
there-
you
you
didn't
know,
see the
there are
bodies
things.
then. You didn't see the bodies, John.
We didn't see the
No.
bodies, but there is obviously something there that is being treated with serious concern by the authorities.
I wanted to ask though, have there been any of these Texas blue dogs? Have there been any attacks on humans that we know of?
Yes.
They have. Please tell.
Yes. There was a woman named Stacia Henderson from Jack County, which is up outside of Dallas, I think Tarrant County, and she was cleaning out an old trailer on her family's property, and when she entered the trailer, one of these animals was inside. It was using it for shelter, and she actually attempted to give it like a bowl of water or something or food, and so she was trying to feed it or get it out, and so she extended her hand, and it lunged forward and bit her hand, and then she had to be, of course, rushed to the hospital and given a series of rabies shots and other things. But I don't know what happened to the animal, if it was shot or just ran off. But that's the only attack that I'm familiar with. That happened in 2010.
That's the only one, is it? Because it seemed timid when she approached it. She gave it water.
Yeah, it wasn't aggressively. Yeah, I think she just startled it because it was kind of seeking shelter in the area, and she extended her hand and scared her. So it's not like it was actively hunting her or chasing her or anything like that. I'm not familiar with any accounts like that.
This is what the viewers want, though, isn't it? Okay, so you don't know any more like attacks on humans or that kind of thing. That's a shame, but anyway, fair enough.
Well, alleged attacks on livestock. I mean, like John said, there's no evidence of the blue dogs drinking blood, but Devin McAnally was convinced that this animal was killing his chickens and lapping up the blood. Phyllis Canyon told me the same thing about the specimen she saw. And then a gentleman named Harvey Hayak actually told me that he thought that the blue dogs had killed one of his calves.
Really?
So I mean, yeah. So these are just allegations. I mean, I haven't seen any evidence of that, but there have been claims that the blue dogs can be aggressive, at least towards livestock animals.
So, what is your view on this then, Ken? What do you think they are? Do you think it is a cryptid, or do you think it's just a general canine that we know of with mange of some kind?
I don't think I would qualify it as a cryptid at this point. You don't have any of the markers that Bernard Heuvelmans would have brought up in terms of an ethnographic history, legendary, a large animal, exceptionally large. I think it's an anomalous. I don't think it's a subspecies yet either, as John was saying. I think it's more of an anomalous variation of known canine species in Texas, primarily coyotes, with a mixture of some Mexican wolf and feral dogs mixed in, and that all of these animals are being afflicted with a combination of genetic issues and perhaps also sarcoptic mange, and perhaps their immune systems are being weakened, as part of this, whatever contaminants or whatever they're dealing with. If their immune systems are weakened, then perhaps they're having more dramatic reactions to the sarcoptic mange. So I think it's kind of a cocktail of different influences coming together and just kind of affecting the feral canine population. But no, I don't any longer view them as a cryptid.
So it's not Dogman. It's not a Dogman, then, isn't it? That's what we want, isn't it? We want a Dogman. That's what we're here for. That's what the viewers are here for.
That'll be another show, won't it? But yeah, that's what the people want. Dogman is definitely topping the cryptozoology charts right now. You still have
Dogman's just Bigfoot with big nose.
One of the things that is, I'll just throw a couple more things into the melting pot. First of all, there are species of domestic dog which do have dark blue skin if you take the hair off. But none of the hairless species of dog have a blue skin. And the other thing is that those weird pads that are found on their haunches, back where the buttocks would be if dogs had buttocks, which they don't. But those have only ever, with one exception, been found on male dogs. On male blue dogs, they have these. I remember you were the first person to tell me about them, Ken, and you called them pouches. And I can't think of a better word for it. I've always tried not to call them pouches because that makes me think of kangaroos in that way. But they have these pads on the back of their haunches, which, with one exception, has always been with male dogs. And that is something that, although I have my stepdaughter is a vet, that for us you American viewers means that she's an animal doctor, not somebody who fought in Vietnam. And my stepdaughter is for you colonials, she's a veterinary surgeon then. And I checked with her and she put the word out. And although there is a rare condition where you can get infected glands in the back of the haunches, they look completely different. It doesn't look anything like the ones that have been seen in both living and preserved specimens. So I agree with Ken. Everything's still up in the air at the moment.
There's questions to be answered, as usual. Which is why we're here. Yeah.
Annette has asked, could there be like the liger, an animal that's occurred as a one-off that can exist but cannot breed themselves?
Yeah.
Now,
Are they a one? Has there only been one, or has there been several? I have seen the liger. Is it they just happen, don't they? But they can't reproduce. That's right, isn't it?
Allegedly, yes.
Well, no, there's film of them. They do exist. They are real.
No, yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's only allegedly they can't reproduce.
They can't reproduce. I thought there was definite, but
I don't know. I
don't know. We'll have to
when
try.
I say allegedly, it means I don't know, not necessarily that nobody knows.
Yeah.
But with the blue dogs, somebody, and forgive me, Ken, if I'm dropping you in it here, but somebody, when I was in Texas last 15 years ago, told me that there'd been sightings of parents with pups.
Yes,
Yes,
Harvey Hayek, who we mentioned a couple times. I think you went to his property out near Fayetteville.
Yeah, nice man.
Yeah, many sightings and of these animals on his property, on his ranch. And yes, he did claim that there were some cubs that we were seen along with presumably their mother at some point. That's the only example or instance I can think of. So that's only one person claiming that, but he did have quite a number of these animals on his property. They were seen several times and sometimes in groups and things. So yeah, maybe they can breed. Who knows?
Well, if they can breed, it suddenly knocks the mange explanation into a cocked hat, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Particularly if the juveniles were, hairless, right out of the chute, right? So that would seem to indicate more of a genetic thing, I think.
These things
Thank
happen,
you,
though.
Barbara.
I have seen a sheep with which here. recently. So
You've seen a sheep with what?
without wool, without a bull sheep, a lamb born, and all the other lambs have wool, but there's one in the pack without. And it's a condition they have. Quite often they die. But you just have to look after them and keep them warm. But no, I've seen that a few weeks ago. So that's all I have anyway. So on the subject.
Well,
Yeah, it's pretty good.
actually, as you brought that up, we've actually the cover story on the next issue of Animals and Men, which is going to be out. I finished it today, so it's going to be out in about 10 days' time. That is actually a story about a sheep born with 5 legs,
Hmm.
which is another mildly interesting, completely erroneous subject.
And was that near a chemical factory?
I have absolutely no idea.
Mm.
But one thing that Ken told me, like he said, we went out to Harvey Hayek's ranch, and one of the things that upset
You two went together. The two of you travelled out
no,
together.
no.
Oh,
I went there with my late wife and with Richie and Naomi West.
yeah.
And while we were there, Harvey took us out to something that was making him very sad, was that his family's pecan orchard. I didn't know that a group of trees growing nuts was called an orchard, but it is. A pecan orchard, the trees were all dying. And I wonder, when Ken said about the coal-fired power station, if that could be the answer to that.
Yes, absolutely was, John. In fact, Harvey showed me they cut a section out of one of the pecan trees on his property that had died, and you could count the rings from the outside. They were sort of blackened, and it matched up with the number of years that the power plant had been there nearby, near his property. So there was actually a lawsuit. Harvey was part of a class action lawsuit of many local ranchers and farmers that were suing the power company, claiming that that particular plant had killed their orchards and affected their livestock and so forth. So that's kind of what spurred the whole idea about the coal burning power plant somehow being related to these Texas blue dog animals.
Well, it does make a hell of a lot of sense, doesn't it? And it might spur the powers that be into doing something about it. Because if people are beginning to take class action lawsuits against them, and people are losing money because of it, and let's face it, governments pay more attention to money than they do to people, it might make a difference.
Especially if we've had no superheroes as well as a result of this. So.
Yeah, well, as I said, I forget the last time I tracked this, but I know that several of the coal burning power plants in Texas, I think there were like 11 left or something, they are starting to close down. And I guess those areas are fortunately going to other sources of power, or whatever those might be. So,
wind power, perhaps.
Well, hopefully it will make a difference. Be interesting to see. And Barbara's just left. Thank you very much, Barbara. And Annette, yes, my dear, you're right. Environmental disasters. So, leaving blue dogs aside for the moment, what else have you been working on recently, Ken? Apart from moving house.
Oh gosh. Well, I was involved last year in an interesting research project. There's a gentleman named Dr. Haskell Hart, who has a PhD from Harvard. He's a chemist, retired chemist. He solidly debunked the Melba Ketchum alleged Bigfoot DNA findings from 2012, 2013. And he's got an excellent book out. Oh, gosh, I can't remember the name. Sasquatch DNA something, but he basically he debunked those alleged findings by Melba Ketchum that people talk about so much. But he was doing a project last year. He brought me out to some areas in central Oklahoma, or I should say eastern Oklahoma. There's an area known as Area X. If you've heard of Area X, it's an active Bigfoot research area for a number of research groups, primarily the North American Wood Ape Conservancy, which sprung out of Craig Woolheater's Texas Bigfoot Research Conservancy. But anyways, Haskell had a sighting of a Sasquatch on this property years ago as part of one of these expeditions. And so he's been going up to that area on a regular basis and collecting water samples from all of the creeks that run through that area around Area X, Cucumber Creek and Peach Creek and so forth. So I was helping him collect water samples, and then he in turn has a laboratory in Colorado that he's working with to do eDNA testing. So he sends the water sample, he filters the water samples out, seals them hermetically, and then ships them off to this lab in Colorado. And they are in turn, for a reasonable fee, I understand, are able to map out the sequences of many different species that have come in contact with those creeks. And he's found, of course, a number of birds and mammals and fish and amphibians and things, but nothing totally remarkable yet, although he is convinced that some of the there has been Homo sapiens eDNA detected in some of those waterways, and he's wondering if that could be somehow connected to Sasquatch. I'm more of a traditional, I guess you would call an aper kind of Bigfoot researcher. I don't think that Bigfoot DNA would be at all close to human, but anyways, I think it was a very encouraging project in terms of, researchers moving away from trail cameras and foot casts and some of the traditional methods that really haven't gotten us anywhere, and embracing this eDNA technology. Now, a big factor of that, of course, is that the cost has become apparently much more affordable or accessible to cryptozoologists and citizen scientists and laymen, right? For years, it was thousands and thousands of dollars to have a DNA sequence, extracted from a sample and mapped out and all that. So that was kind of cool. I don't know where he's at right now with that project. Of course, I moved cross country to New York, so I'm not going to be working with him as much. But that's kind of cool that that stuff like that is starting to happen in the Bigfoot research field, where again the laboratory costs have become at least accessible to some segment of Bigfoot and Sasquatch researchers.
And there's still samples to be analyzed with this.
Yeah, it's ongoing. It's an ongoing project. He's established a good relationship with this lab in Colorado. And I actually sent them, when I went to Loch Ness a year and a half ago, I collected a water sample after an intriguing account and sent that off to them as well. Had a funny moment at the security in Scotland when I was leaving Edinburgh, and the guy was almost rifling through my toiletries bag, and I was afraid he was going to find my Loch Ness water sample and question me about it, but he didn't. He overlooked it, so I managed to get that back to the States, sent it to this lab.
He didn't find the heroin either, did he?
Yeah. Let's not be starting any rumors here, gentlemen. But that was actually a funny incident too, because I sent the water sample off to the lab in Colorado, and they came back with results of 2 different types of algae, Scalophora, and I forget what the second one was. So I was quoted by a UK publication as saying, well, if the Loch Ness Monster exists, it must be made of algae. And of course, that got blown into a news story that, cryptozoologist claims that the Loch Ness Monster is an algae monster and stuff, which wasn't my intention. I was just kind of making a remark and trying to be funny, but it kind of got blown out of.
No, you can't joke. You can't joke about Loch Ness. Ken. It's a serious subject.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
look
Yeah.
at that. We always take the Loch Ness Monster seriously, don't we, gentlemen?
We take it as serious as we can, John. But yes, but so what was the outcome of that then? So you took your sample and basically it was just algae, was it? It was no,
Yeah,
wasn't plesiosaur, not
nothing
plesiosaur.
else. No, they didn't even come
Shit.
up with any fish species or anything. So I was a little
No.
disappointed, but I was excited because it was my first eDNA
Hmm.
sample and test, and I was able to
Was
pull it off. So
the Quest weekend you went on? Was it the Quest
yes,
weekend? Yeah, because
yeah, the
they
last
got
weekend of August in
yeah,
23.
23. Because they're having them regular now, which is good, isn't it? So I think
Yes.
they got one this month as well. So yeah, it's pretty
Didn't
good.
you take eDNA samples from the mountain streams in California where you were looking for the unknown species of giant salamander?
Yes, that's actually a good thought. It's been a while since we've been there. I think we were there in 2021. But now that I have basically established that process, if we ever did go back to Northern California and do that follow up on those giant salamanders, that would be an excellent. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Because that's something that really would be interesting, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I've always been fascinated with the stories of the Trinity Alps giant salamander. Do you want? It's not a very well-known story. Do you want to tell us a bit about it, Ken?
Well, the Trinity Alps giant salamanders, the accounts originally began popping up in the 1920s, and there were some prospectors, and I forget the name of the gentleman, but it started in the 1920s, and there was a gentleman up, and now we're talking about an area that is actually adjacent to the Trinity National Forest, is actually adjacent to Bluff Creek, and most people know of the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot film, and a lot of the Bigfoot tracks that were being found in the late 1950s by people like Jerry Crew and Bob Titmus and John Green and so forth. But if you look in some of the early literature on the subject, I think like Ivan Sanderson may have written about them, and some other, because they would, people would start asking around about Bigfoot, and subsequently other things would pop up. Well, I haven't heard of Bigfoot, but I did see a giant salamander up in this remote area. Now, there was a guy named Charles Hubband, who was a local, I forget if he was a religious man, a pastor or something, but he was up in this particular area, and there was a lake known as Fish Lake, and it later became known as Hubband Lake, and he claimed that he saw a number of these giant salamanders in the water. He could see them, basically their movement underneath the water, and he said that they ranged anywhere from like 5 to possibly 8 or 9 feet long, which is, truly monstrous for a salamander, as you know. So even far beyond the size of the Japanese and Chinese giant salamanders. So he attempted to hook one of these animals with a hook and bring it in, and he wasn't able to do so. So that's one of the famous accounts from that area. And through the years, there have been expeditions to go search for them. Tom Slick, originally the San Antonio oil millionaire who founded the Pacific Northwest expedition, which had all of your early, John Green, Rene DeHinden, Bob Titmus, and then later Peter Byrne, and some of those guys were all teaming up looking for Bigfoot or Sasquatch in the late 1950s. And Tom Slick was funding all of this work in the field, and he sort of heard of these giant salamander accounts and kind of sent some of these Bigfoot guys off on side projects where he would say, "Oh, well, you're up in that area. We're also interested in these giant salamanders." Tom Slick was such an interesting guy, right? He searched for so many cryptids around the world, the Yeti and the Lake Iliamna monster in Alaska and all these things. But so the stories have been around for a long time. The local tribe, which is not the Hoopa per se, but there's another tribe. It starts with a Y, and I can't remember the name. I'm sorry, but they have a a legend of a creature known as the Long One, which is basically a long serpentine mystery animal that lives supposedly in some of these mountain streams and so forth. So that's been connected to these giant salamander accounts as well. Now, as far as known salamander species in that area, there is actually a species known as the Pacific giant salamander. I can't think of the Latin name, but they're called giant salamanders, but they only top out at about 12 inches in length, I think, which is a pretty decent size for a salamander, I suppose. But there has been a theory that perhaps that species is capable of growing to larger sizes than has been previously documented, perhaps 1.5 feet long or longer, and that could be one possible explanation for these giant salamander accounts, that people are misidentifying the known species, which we did encounter some of those up there. So that's kind of the giant salamander thing in a nutshell. If you get up to some of these areas, they are pretty remote. It's old growth forest that's been basically untouched by man. You know, people don't think about that in terms of California so much, but when you get into those areas of coastal Northern California and the Trinity National Forest, those are some pretty remote and well-forested areas that have never really been touched by logging or any type of development. So the potential is there, I think, for an unknown species of salamander. And of course, the long-standing hypothesis has been that they would be somehow related to the Cryptobranchia, the Japanese and Chinese giant salamanders, which live in very similar environments, you know, cold water, fast-moving cold water, kind of mountain streams and things. So that's kind of the whole mystery in a nutshell, John.
And there is, of course, there's a North American giant salamander, which is fairly distantly related to the Asian ones, called the hellbender, isn't it? And that grows, I think, just over 24 inches, something like that, 24, 30 inches, which is still one hell of a salamander.
And those are endemic to the eastern U.S., I believe. I don't know if there are no hellbenders out west, as far as we know.
Not that we know of, but if there are salamanders, giant salamanders in the Trinity Alps, could they be one, an unknown species of Cryptobranchia? That's the Chinese and Japanese one, because now it's known that instead of there being 2 species, there are actually 5 species of Asian giant salamander, one of which, Sligo salamander in South China, we were distantly involved in unearthing. 2, are they a Western USA analog to the Eastern USA hellbender? 3, are they, like you said, particularly large Pacific giant salamanders? Or 4, are they something completely different? What do you think? What would your best bet be?
Oh, wow. You forgot, you know, to tie into your 4th suggestion, we had a wildlife biologist with us on that particular expedition, a guy named Jim Whitehead, and he was exploring theories about, you know, apparently there were some real whoppers of salamanders here in North America. I forget what period, you know, if it was Pleistocene or Pliocene or Miocene, but, you know, millions of years ago, a few million years ago, there were some real whoppers in terms of big prehistoric salamanders in North America. So that was another possible romantic explanation. You know, our friend Carl Schuker is always kind of using the term composite identity for a lot of cryptids, which I think kind of hits the mark on a lot of these cases. I think you have a lot of different influences that are sometimes being woven together that form these kind of cryptid archetypes, right? So in terms of the Trinity giant salamanders, of course, the romantic in me wants to think that there's an undiscovered species of giant salamander out there. I think that it's probably more likely that people are exaggerating or finding the size, you know, some exceptional individuals from the known salamander species, or in some cases, and I forgot to mention this earlier, there was a famous account of a giant salamander being fished out of the Sacramento River in Northern California. And I think this was in the 40s or 50s. And it turned out that this particular giant salamander, which was, I think, a Japanese giant salamander, was a pet that somebody had either escaped or somebody had released it into the Sacramento River. So there you have a case of an invasive, Asian salamander that's, it finds itself in a perfectly welcoming habitat when you get it out there. So maybe you have some escaped pets, maybe you have some exceptional individuals, and maybe, just maybe, there is some type of isolated population of these big, cryptobranchids or whatever in some of these areas as well. I don't really know, John. It's a great mystery,
It's one of those ones that has fascinated me for years and years and years.
Definitely.
Because I'm a salamander freak anyway. I love salamanders, and I've been keeping them and studying them since I was a little boy. So, and boys and girls, do you realise we've been on air for an hour and a half now?
Nice.
And we have got, I beg your pardon, David, what did you just do?
I just lean forward to look at the clock.
Can we just have a quick? Can we have a quick thing with Ken though? Ken, what's your view on the Patterson Gimlin film? What do you think?
Oh, I'm still convinced that it's genuine.
If you think it's a real Bigfoot, yeah.
Oh yeah, I told Dr. Jeff Meldrum, we were having this conversation one time. I said, I grew up on monster movies: King Kong, Godzilla, Planet of the
Me
Apes,
too.
Creature from the Black Lagoon. That was what I was kind of
Frankenstein.
raised. Yeah, I was raised on that stuff.
Exactly.
And this was in the 60s and 70s mostly. So when I saw that footage for the first time, I think in 1976, when I was 8 or 9 years old, the first thing I said was, "That's not a costume." I was just, it was just a visceral reaction, but that does not look like a costume.
My view was, I thought it was real.
Yes, and all these years later, I've watched the film countless times, and of course now we have all the technologies where there are stabilizations and overlays and all these things. And granted, skeptics of the film bring up good points in terms of the image. The Sasquatch on the film is very tiny when you realize, that this was a 16 millimeter camera with this special lens and stuff. So it's been kind of blown up and enlarged, and we don't really have the original copies of the film either. We're working from like second and third generation copies of the film and digitizing those. But you can see so much detail now when this thing is moving. The breasts, the mammary glands look very natural when she turns and moves.
Movement on the legs.
The move. You can see the shin muscles kind of vibrate every time it steps. You can see the toes curling up when it steps. I mean, I can't believe that Roger Patterson, though apparently he was a very industrious kind of guy, could have fabricated a world-class Hollywood-style costume. It would have been far beyond anything they would have had in 1967, right?
It's true. Have you read that book? What's the guy's name? Jeff Green? Or there was a book out a few years ago, filming Bigfoot or some shit like that. I can't remember. I had it. I bought it, and it really goes into detail about Roger Patterson and a character assassination on him. I don't know if you've read that.
Greg Long, yeah.
Greg Long, that's the one, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? What do you make of that?
I mean, he may have been accurate about some of the things in terms of Patterson. He probably had some, Bob Gimlin. I've known Bob Gimlin since 2004, and I've spoken to him many times about the film. Of course, his memory is starting to fade because he's closing in on 90.
90, is he?
And he told me that Roger Patterson basically hired a guy to look like Gimlin and go on tour when he was showing the film. So there were some shenanigans for sure. Bob Gimlin has never wavered in his account. He didn't even believe that Bigfoot exists. Roger Patterson was the guy that was obsessed with Bigfoot. Gimlin was his logistics guy that brought the horses and the truck. And apparently Roger never even paid him for the gas to get to Bluff Creek and back. But Bob wasn't convinced that Bigfoot existed until they rode around that down tree on the creek bed. Bob said, "Holy shit, it's real." And
the rest is history.
I got to visit the film site a few years ago. It's changed quite a bit through the years. Obviously, it's grown up. There was a big flood event back in the 60s that had kind of leveled everything, but now it's kind of grown up. But they've identified the Bluff Creek Project in Northern California has spent years there identifying, and you can line it up with if you've got a frame of a blow up of the film, still, you can see some of the trees and stumps are there still after all these years, believe it or not. Oh, yep, there's that stump, there's that tree. What really blew my mind being at the film site, because they've marked out and figured out exactly where Roger Patterson, Bob Gimlin were, and where the creature was and where it moved and the trajectory. Roger was up to within, I think, he said 60 feet originally, but I think it was closer than that.
Yeah.
At one point, he was within 30, 40, 50 feet of this animal before it began to move off. So he was really darn close to it. So I don't think we appreciate that aspect of it. And again, there's an illusion with the film, because the way, whatever lens or focal setting he had, it gave a much greater feeling of depth or distance. So he was pretty close to this thing. Yeah, I think it's a genuine film, and frankly, it's the only film of a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch that is worth putting any time into as far as analysis. Everything else is just kind of,
kooky.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So yeah, I'm convinced it's real, but I don't know if we'll ever convince the world.
I'll tell you what, Ken, we're coming to an end tonight, but it would be good in the future, John, if we can get Ken back on and we can really go into depth on this. What do you reckon?
Yeah, of course.
For the viewers. I'm sure
Ken's
the viewers
an
would
old
like.
friend of mine. It's an absolute
Yeah.
treat to have him on. So get used to it, Ken. You're going to be a regular on it.
This is, but the viewers would love to hear this and your view on this as well, because this is the one thing, isn't it? The one thing cryptozoologists have got, which we hold on to.
Absolutely, guys. Well, it's been an honor to be here with you. I've been associated with John in the CFZ for decades now, and it's been a distinct honor. Great people, I mean, through and through. So that's and you guys have done some really amazing work in terms of the expeditions that Rich goes on and organizes, and keep up the good work with all of the videos and publications and everything. We really need it. So
thank you, old friend. We will do, I promise. Trust me, I'm a cryptozoologist. Time to go home, time to go home from your simply spooky adrenaline ride. Time to go home, time to go home, even if you're terrified. Goodbye. Time to go home, time to go home. Vivian and her weird friends are all going home. Time to go home, time to go home. Vivian is waving goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.